So one of the things I really wanted to share your work with our audience for is the benefit to achievement of any kind, like to help people out there who have dreams and ambitions but can't get around to doing them. Because as you mentioned in the book, at the time, there was a 10-year McKinsey research paper on the benefits of flow and how it was one of the most important business attributes or skill sets that somebody could have.
So the benefits are ridiculous. I'll just go through. Um, the research was done all over the place. I'll try to give you the sources because they're all over the place. So we'll start with motivation and productivity, which go through the roof. And the McKinsey study you referenced, this is a self-reported study, so you've got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But they went around the globe for 10 years talking to CEO and leaders of really large organizations. How much more productive are you in flow? And the average response was 500% more productive. Some of the responses, for example, Richard Branson once said to me, there's 2 hours in flow, there is nothing I can't get done. Well, how do you quantify that? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? Like, what is that percentage? I don't know how to measure that, but we see that all over the place. In our research at the Flow Research Collective. So for those who are not familiar with this, we're a research and training organization. We're focused on the neurobiology of peak human performance, so what's going on in the brain and the body when humans perform at their very best. On the research side, we do this we do this stuff in-house and in conjunction with folks at Imperial College in London, University of Southern California, University of San Francisco, UC Davis, and on and on and on. And on the training side, we work in 130 countries. So, and we work with tens of thousands of individuals, right? We work with everybody from like stay-at-home dads to 9-to-5 moms, all the way up to like US Navy SEALs, professional athletes. We also train a lot of organizations. We work with tech companies like Facebook and automobile manufacturers like Audi and, consultancies like Accenture and on and on and on. All of this is to say the only reason you should really care is, one, we have a wildly diverse, globally accurate picture of peak performance. Like what works, what doesn't, why? Because we are data geeks. We measure everything and anything. And so I can tell you, for example, we see after our 8-week training, as a general rule, we see a 4x increase in productivity for people really consistently. In fact, I just saw some recent data. Every time we put through 1,000 more people, we grab 300 at random and look at their numbers just to see where we are when our baseline is. And I just looked at the most recent numbers, and productivity was up. People were 4x as productive as before. So that's sort of in line with McKinsey's numbers, and says, okay, yeah, this stuff. We see the U.S. Department of Defense figured out that soldiers in flow will learn 240 to 500% faster than normal. This is a big deal, right? Like 2 reasons, right? You could talk about like those fabled Anders Ericsson's Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours to mastery. We know how important, expertise is in business. This research shows that we can cut that in half, right? As I talked about, flow underpins grit. At a really, really deep level, resilience. I'll give you a new study. This happened during COVID. They were looking at who flourished during COVID and who languished, who got their ass kicked, who thrived, and what was the biggest differentiator. And they looked at tons of stuff. And it turns out the amount of flow you got in your life during COVID was the only thing that mattered. It was the largest differentiator for flourishing. This is not surprising because we know that flow is built in to happiness, well-being, life satisfaction, meaning, purpose. I mean, like the data here is like, how much does it elevate those things? It's, depends on which category you're in, and depends on how you measure it. But literally when psychologists define happiness and well-being, there are 3 tiers available to all of us. And the best we get to feel is defined by how much flow we get, and how that flow is tied to our purpose. The second best we get to feel is how much flow we get, and that's tied to our goals. And then there's just general happiness, where we don't really have a whole lot of control. So flow is deeply tied to overall well-being, happiness. It is radically important for increasing empathy and what is known, depending on nature relatedness, it's our ability to see, perceive, and care about the natural world. So this is some of the stuff I actually write about in the Devil's Dictionary and Last Tango, right? The overlap with environmentalism that flows about. And then there's the physical side, right? Where we see increases in strength, stamina. In fact, flow, we can't tell if flow increases strength or it deadens pain so much and it turns off. So it turns out you've got a strength governor, right? You can at any one point, you go to the gym, your body is willing to do about 60% of max work because it doesn't want you to get hurt. If you're a trained weightlifter or a trained athlete, you can get that up to about 80, 86%. And then it's like a hard and fast. And the only two times you get access to the remaining 14% is like fight or flight, the woman lifts the car off her baby kind of scenario, and flow, right? Those are the only times you can go above that. So we see that with strength, with stamina, with fast twitch, muscle response. We can go on and on. Business-wise, really important. If you look at all the studies on what is the most important business skill for the 21st century, it's always creativity and innovation. And creativity and innovation spike massively in flow. Depends on who you're looking for numbers and how you're breaking apart. Creativity is 400 to 700% above normal. But here's the cool thing. Teresa, I always screw her last name up, Amabile. I think that's wrong, but she's at Harvard. She's brilliant. Business researcher. She found out that the heightened creativity that comes in a flow state, average flow state, there's no average, but let's say it's 90 minutes long. She figured out that amplified creativity sticks around for a day, sometimes 2 days after flow. So that's really cool as well. I can keep going. This list actually keeps going. Flow is optimal human performance. So I'm literally listing all the aspects of human performance, everything gets optimized. In fact, when you say everything gets optimized, this is just so it's absurd, but this is an actual science conversation that we're having now. So we know that we've got the big microbiome and, it's in our gut and it's a lot of foreign bacteria. So the microbiome is involved in flow. And so people are literally now asking this question. It's a real question, but it's just sort of blows my mind. So many things get optimized in performance that you have to ask yourself this question, is optimal performance human, or is the non-human portion of us, right, also cooperating to produce ultimate human performance? That's a real science question right now, which is crazy, but it's a real science question.
Oh man, that is awesome. That's awesome. That's where it's gotten to now. Even since you wrote this bad boy as well.
That you have to remember that book was when did I publish that? 2013, I want to say. So most of the research that book was probably the research that went into it by almost the field as a whole, with the exception of a couple things that probably got dropped in later, was complete by 2011. And when I wrote that book, just to put it in perspective, there was maybe the second textbook on flow had just sort of come out. There are now this entire shelf that I'm pointing at right behind me. Those are all flow textbooks, and the vast textbooks, not even books, textbooks for graduate level psychology and neuroscience students that have all showed up in the past decade. When I wrote Rise of Superman, pretty much every flow paper that had ever been written is in the footnotes, documented in the footnotes. So in Art of Impossible, which is a more recent book that I wrote on this topic, it was 4 times bigger than those. And since then, I think it's doubled again because there are so many researchers. The field is so exploding. It's a great time to be studying peak human performance.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.